After the Hunt, which is the new film by Luca Guadagnino, who, Bigger Splash, Call Me By Your Name, Suspiria Challenges, which I made tennis sexy, so well done. And Queer, which gave Daniel Craig a chance to stretch his wings. This is written by Nora Garrett. And there's been a lot of press about it because it's got an incredibly star-studded cast: Julia Roberts, Andrew Garfield, Ayo Edebiri, Chloe Sevigny, Michael Stuhlbarg. So Julia Roberts is Alma, who is a Yale philosophy professor who desperately wants tenure. This is what everyone wants, tenure. She's married to Michael Stuhlbarg's Fred, who's a psychiatrist, but she seems far closer to Hank, who's played by Andrew Garfield, who's a colleague who also wants tenure. So they're up against each other. They're good friends. They seem to be more than good friends. We meet them at a party where Maggie, played by Ayo Edebiri, and she's a student who idolizes Alma, finds herself on the receiving end of Hank having a go at young people for being too frightened of offense. Here's a clip.
Why are you so tight? All your generation, everyone in your generation, you're so tight. Again, thank you.
Sorry.
Perfect. Exemplar. What are you scared of? Scared of saying the wrong thing or offending someone? When did offending someone become the preeminent cardinal sin?
I mean, I don't have a date exactly, but maybe it's around the same time your generation started making sweeping generalizations about ours.
Are you scared that we're gonna think less of you if it isn't perfect? Whatever shame you have around your self-expression, it's false.
He's so edgy. He's got all these edgy ideas. Anyway, so they leave the party together, and the next morning she comes to Alma claiming in weirdly vague terms to have been assaulted by him. So should Alma believe her? Should she stand by a friend who is also, as we know, a rival for tenure? Is Maggie infatuated with Alma? Is she making up the claim about Hank? Is there something in Alma's past that might cloud her judgment of this kind of issue on a personal level? There's a whole thing going on about whether her thesis is actually any good or whether it's plagiarized. And the film has this attitude of like, we're asking interesting questions about the gray areas of consent and coercion in this cancel culture and a time in which mob morality can blah 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 blah. And okay, that sounds interesting, but in fact the film swings between being oblique and irritating and actually predominantly just plain clunky. So there's one plot point that revolves around Maggie finding a secret envelope whilst looking for something in Alma's loo, which is the most... it's a device that is so unbelievable that it's incomprehensible that it ever got past script stage. There's another thing about... There's an illness which keeps... It's a very much a movie illness, which at key moments when they can't figure out how to end a scene, suddenly the illness will take over and then they'll wake up in hospital. There's another thing about the fact that Maggie is black and gay and dating a non-binary student and the daughter of one of the university's biggest donors, which is a contrivance that seriously somebody should have got. I'm sorry, you can have two of those, but because of the point that you're trying to make, no. The other thing is that when the allegations are first discussed, and there's the whole thing about the conversation that is had, at no point does it seem to tally with what would actually happen if that conversation was taking place. Now, look, ambiguity is one thing, and I understand that the film believes that it exists in this ambiguous world in which it's asking difficult questions. Bad storytelling, however, is unforgivable. I mean, the exposition of this film is so self-consciously oblique that you're like 20 minutes into it, and before you figure out whether or not Julia Roberts' character is married to Fred, because the performance that Fred is doing appears to be from another film entirely, and you think, what's... And again, oh yeah, fine, well, we're trying to confound expectations. No, you're not. What you're doing is you're just doing it really badly. And Michael Stuhlbarg's performance is unforgivable. I mean, absolutely unforgivable. Somebody should have... It's like Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean. Somebody just should have gone in and said, no, absolutely not. Chloe Savini as the student liaison officer who gets to do this speech about, it's got really hard for me to listen to the kids nowadays because, they've got everything, and yet the first injustice that happens to them, they think that the world revolves around them. And the film wants you to think that what it's doing is, like I said, unpicking these difficult issues in this strange time, and everything's very unclear. It's really... And it's really funny because when I was watching it, I was thinking, this is boring and it's badly acted and the exposition isn't very good. And the more I've thought about it since seeing it, the more I've gone from being, this is a film I don't like, to this is a film which I actively dislike, to this is a film which actually really, really annoys me. And then I decided to do some reading about it. And it's produced by Brian Grazer, who, produced a bunch of Ron Howard things. And I didn't know this, but Grazer voted for Trump in 2024 and said of this film, before this project existed, I was very much in the anti-woke category. It just got too extreme. And this movie shows the damage of that by dealing with false accusations on the Yale campus. So any ambiguity that's in the film, there's no ambiguity in that. And I read that in an article, which is an article that was basically lambasting the film for having retrograde politics. I think the problem with it is this. You could do an analysis of it that said, it's politics of this, that, and the other. I just think it's annoying. I think it's badly made. I think it's smug, self-satisfied, spending time in the company of a bunch of characters that I never believed in for 1 minute, doing really irritating things, falling into that category of American films about academia that have the kind of seminars that never happen, the kind of classroom discussions that never happen, the kind of interactions that never happen outside of movies in which, as I said before, illnesses are absolutely movie illnesses. The score is by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, with whom I'm a bit cross at the moment anyway because of their, production of Tron Arse. The score here is really overbearingly, quirkily odd in a way that's really annoying, and he's just kind of doing the thing about the film going, look, we're doing a weird, unsettling score because these are weird, unsettling times. And then every now and then you get this motif of a ticking clock, which appears to be there just because somebody's thought there's no tension in this. We better put the sound of a ticking clock in there because otherwise it's not going to work. So way too long, and a coda at the end of it that is so fatuous it really should have hit the cutting room floor. There was a film that I reviewed a while ago called Sorry Baby, which does all of this for a fraction of the cost and in half the time. Yeah, like I said, I've gone from thinking I don't like this to thinking I actively dislike this to thinking the more I think about it, the more irritating I find it. It is, and believe me, I've said this before, I know the irony of me saying this. It is the smuggest thing I have seen all year.